In this video, we're going to implement props for the first time and see how that one-way data flow happens at a basic level. So we've said that we need a top-level customizer component to own the data because the image needs to know the color of the sneaker. And of course, the color selector, when we eventually have one, is going to need to know that as well. So the state we care about will eventually come from the product customizer and be passed down to these child components as props. Anything a child component needs, state, callback functions, whatever, comes in as props. So switching back to the code, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pass in the things that we need to these child components from the product customizer. To start out, we're going to keep this super simple. We're just going to pass in some hard-coded props. So for the product image, what we're going to need to know is what color to display. So let's set up a color prop. We'll just pass in red. And for the size selector, we're going to need to know what the current size is. So let's say 8 for that. Now you'll notice I'm using quotes here for red and curly braces down here. Curly braces are for any JavaScript expression that needs to be passed as a prop. If you just need to pass a string, you can work with it just like a regular-looking HTML attribute. But really, it's a prop, just it happens to be passing a string. So eventually, these are not going to be hard-coded, and some other cleverness will be here in our product customizer to determine what these should be. But for now, we're just going to hard-code them, and then we're going to use them in our child components. So, for example, here in the size selector, we've already seen that we have this props argument that's passed in. This gives me access to any of the props that come in from my parents. And what we're going to use that size prop that's passed into the size selector is to determine what the default value for my select box should be. And what we want for that is default value. And the prop that we want to use to implement that default value is called default value. So what's that going to be? That's actually going to be an expression. And we can address what's coming in on the props using object syntax. So this will be props.size. I'll save the file and switch back to the browser to confirm that everything's working so far. Let's refresh this. And where before I had size 7 selected because that was the first item in the pop-up menu, now 8 is selected by default. Great. So far, so good. Now let's implement the prop on the sneaker. That would be the product image component here. We also have props, and what we need to do is substitute this color prop for red. Now it's going to be the same thing here. We can pass this in and just update the size here to be props.color. Now you can see this doesn't quite work because now we're converting this string literal into an expression. So we need to turn this whole thing into an expression by surrounding it with braces. So I'll switch back to the browser and refresh. We can see that the sneaker is still red. Let's change our prop to green this time. Refresh again. Great. So that is working as well. One nice thing that we can do here, because we are using Babel to transform our JavaScript, is that instead of using string concatenation like this, we can convert this into a template literal. This is a feature of ES6 that lets us do our strings in line without having to do pluses and keeping track of opening and closing all those quote marks. And what that looks like is another set of curly braces with a $ in front of it. We'll just put props.color inside there. So I can save this again, switch back, refresh, and there we go. This is just one of those syntactical niceties that ECMAScript 6 brings for us. And so we can stop there for now. The basics of props are just to pass them in as attributes and then using them by calling them from the props object that you pass in to your function components.